Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Welcome back to Fast Friends. We're here with a really special guest here for Veterans Day week. And I think is that a redundancy, Veterans Day week? Anyway, really excited to have this guest. This guest is a fast friend of mine that was my roommate when training at the Princeton Training Center. He's an accomplished athlete, accomplished soldier, accomplished coach. He is one of the best human beings that you could probably meet, always giving it all for those around him. And I'm really excited to welcome, associate head coach of the Princeton Tigers, Matt Smith, to Fast Friends. Matt, thanks for coming on board today.
Thanks for that introduction. It's like you make me feel really good.
Good.
Oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. Just wait till Justin takes over.
Yeah. So yeah, Matt, thanks for coming. I mean, Justin's gonna get you on the hype train, but we're really honored to have you here, especially during this week. Having fathers and uncles that all served, and really appreciate what you do for us.
Yeah, no worries. It's great. This is good stuff. I like what you guys are doing, and get some more talk out there. It's always good.
And I think you're our first lightweight too, but I won't ruin it. I'll let Faber do his thing, man, and remind you of why you're a fast friend.
Yeah, no, right on. Welcome to the show, Matt. Yeah, just for the audience, so they know who we're talking to today. So Matt Smith grew up in Northern Virginia, went on to attend the University of Wisconsin. So by the way, we have like a 15 bullet bio on you, so like you should feel pretty good. It's deep. It goes deep. Attended University of Wisconsin as part of the military athlete program following graduation from Wisco. Commissioned to the Army as an officer, joined the Army's world-class athlete program, and really continued his rowing. Wound up becoming a 2004 Olympian, which we'll get into in the show. Represented us in the 04 games in Athens. Was actually a 7-time national team member, and basically, medaled in the Pan Am Games, the World Championships, and National Championships. If that wasn't enough, was a U.S. Army Ranger graduate, completed Ranger School, which was no small feat. Probably, we'll get into how that compares to rowing training. Airborne School graduate, training as a paratrooper. Wound up becoming a captain and was promoted twice within his career, and again, achieved the rank of a captain in the military. Bronze Star recipient, which is a service medal for combat. Materialist service medal. Is that how
Meritorious.
it goes? Meritorious. Yeah, good thing I majored in communications. He also that's for combat and peacetime performance. And if that wasn't enough, he came back and translated those skills into coaching. Started out at Cornell, where his crews earned Sprints medals. Wound up coaching the under-23 national team, and then wound up coming back and training Princeton. First within the kind of lower varsity and freshman crews, but then obviously now as the associate head coach, basically for the last 8 seasons. Under his guidance, have had tremendous success, right? So Princeton's had a really good run, have had, tons of success even this past year. We'll talk about that, but had a really killer season last year. And then again, like just to summarize it all, like career long, high level of excellence, right? So Army Ranger, Olympian, collegiate coach, collegiate rower, and now a Mettle Factory Fast Friends participant. So with that, we're stoked to have you on.
Bullet point number 1 now.
Bullet point number 1 now should be
highest bullet point.
Should be the top of your resume. Just hint,
right, when I update
it. Absolutely.
Right on your LinkedIn, sure. Right on top of your LinkedIn.
That should be in the headline of your LinkedIn, just so you're aware. But we won't hold you to it. We could give you the template if you need it, though.
Yeah, you'll have to teach me how to update.
Yeah, no problem. So welcome. Yeah, stoked to have you on.
Smith, it is wild. It's one of the most fun things about doing this is that, we know who's coming on. I harass you during the week about coming on, trying to guilt you into it. And just reflecting, it's just really amazing to reflect on the type of people that we get to surround ourselves with. And it's really even more entertaining right now is because my daughters are obsessed with the Special Forces show on Hulu, right? Where they take a bunch of celebrities and they put them through 10 days of selection. Right. And so, we've been watching that and it really just kind of sends me back because, Steve and I got to do it. I did it a couple of times. We used to get to spend a day with the buds out there. And I would love to, before we get into all of that stuff, really just, if you could take us back to the beginning, like, where was Matt Smith when rowing entered your life? And what really called you to it? Like, what was it about? Like, was it the grip of the oar handle, the feeling of the water underneath you? Was it like somebody just forced you into it like me, and it changed your life? Or is it something that organically grew?
I think it's for probably the vast majority of people, right, would agree with this. I got into it because of some friends. It's as simple as that. There was no amazing sort of thing, and we had just moved back from Germany, where my dad was stationed for in the military, and moved back to Northern Virginia. And in 8th grade, I played middle school soccer, and then in high school, it was kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? And some friends were going to do fall rowing, and I just went down there, and next thing you know, that was fall of 1992, and now we're in the fall of 2024. So and a lot of other stuff has gone on in between, but yeah, there was no any major thing. I mean, the one interesting fact is, so this was 1992, and so obviously I'm an older guy, but in 92, the Igor Grinko, who was the head sculling coach of the U.S. national team, they were training on the Occoquan in Northern Virginia, which is where I lived. And some of those guys, coincidentally, actually lived in some townhouses, across the courtyard from where I lived. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but in hindsight, it's kind of interesting. Those guys were in and around, and we kind of knew about it. So rowing was around, and it was just like, okay, go try it, sort of thing. But it was sort of an interesting cross section of things that eventually came out. One of my falls of rowing, Igor Grinko's son was my coach. So just kind of a wild sort of, at the time, fall of the Soviet Union, and he's over here randomly coaching high school novices in the fall, sort of thing. But no, I think I rowed in high school, large public high school, Woodbridge High School, and what I always tell people my time about then was I really learned to just like the sport of rowing, not about results, because yes, I wanted to win, but we never did, basically. So it wasn't, I was not having success in the sport for that. It was kind of by my senior year of high school, it's like I just really liked rowing and wanted to keep doing it at the collegiate level. And that's what sort of led me to the University of Wisconsin. Basically, it's like, okay, I had made a decision. I wanted to go to a large Division I university and do a varsity sport. I didn't want to do club rowing. I was done with bake sales. I was done with all that, and I wanted to experience what it was like to be a varsity athlete at a school. And so it kind of turned into, okay, hey, what places were out there that I could go as a 6 foot, 165 pound, 632 erg, and just be given the opportunity. And at the time, that was Wisconsin. Sort of.
Still pretty good
Not for
stats.
nothing.
Those
Not
are-
for
those are
nothing.
still pretty good
Six
stats.
six thirty,
pretty
like
good.
632. And
So again, okay, hey, we were talking about before this came on, right? Beginning of basically the internet.
Yeah.
And if I had known better, if I had known what recruiting was, if I had known what any of that was, yeah, I probably could have been recruited as a very good lightweight. When I look back at who some of my teammates were on the national team and guys I eventually competed with or against, and I saw, I was like, oh, like I dug and found a result. Like, I beat all you guys in high school, but I didn't know about that. Right? You just didn't. There wasn't, if you talk to any college coach for that time, it was like, yeah, you'd read some results in rowing news every now and then, go to a regatta here or there, and maybe a coach from a high school would give you a phone call or something like that. But recruiting didn't exist in its current state of form, and that's a lot of it is social media and the internet. It's just accessibility is so much out there now on the rowing front, which is good and bad, I would say.
Yeah. So did you reach out to Coach Clark or did they find you?
Jabbo. It would have been
How'd it
Jabbo,
go?
right?
No, it was Chris Clark was the freshman coach and the lead recruiter. And we randomly had some pamphlets, if I remember right. We had some pamphlets, like my coach had some stuff from colleges that had just mailed media guides, right? That's what people used to do. And so sort of my path, I visited Princeton, Steve, and, classic high school kid. It was the middle of the summer, and I showed up at the boathouse and I said, is Coach Tatey here? Because he was the freshman coach. And thank goodness he wasn't at the time, because like just stranger unannounced, he was obviously at the World Championships is where he was. So I visited Princeton randomly. I visited Penn randomly. And when sort of applied to some schools, didn't get into them, and then was looking at, okay, hey, who still had admissions or application deadlines, in December, January, February, and who was doing well on the rowing front, right? I was a student of the sport. I loved rowing. I was a rowing geek, basically. And I was just sort of tracking results and had seen, okay, hey, there's this cruise and teams that had just sort of kept appearing in sort of A-level finals and a lot of the boats. And at the time, one school's literature was still basically, hey, if you're not 6'2" or taller, don't bother writing us. So that sort of X'd that school out for me. Like I was 6 foot. I was like, okay, I can't do that. But so I applied, got into Wisconsin on my own. And once I got admitted, I wrote Chris Clark a letter saying, hey, I'm this big, this size is my erg. I got in. Can I come row there? I just wanted, can I come row? That's all. Just give me a chance. And he was like, yeah, we love the little guys. And he had 2 of my good buddies still to this day who are a year above me, who are smaller guys, were the stern pair of the freshman 8 at the time. And so went out and visited in April of my senior year with my dad. And I had sort of already made the decision, as long as the campus wasn't ugly, I was going to go there. And for those that have ever been to Madison, it's nowhere near that. It's beautiful and it's an amazing place. And so, sort of ended up there. Very sort of first person in my family to, go to that state, let alone that university. My whole family's from North Carolina, so it was a sort of very different thing. But if you were to ask my mother, that's my personality, sort of independent person looking to do something very different, having grown up in a military family all over the world.
That was gonna. You've kind of led perfectly into like the next level is like, so you found rowing and you're a student of the sport. And I think that's, you were living together. I always used to love talking strategy with you. Right. And I think that, and I told these guys, we bonded a lot over Top Chef, right? Like you're watching Top Chef in the cooking competition, but being a military family. And then I think there's this interesting thing where you had the Grinko effect that was happening near you. And I got to imagine if his son was your coach, like, did you do the crazy, like, bucket of concrete around your head exercise?
We did all sorts of things.
Yeah, you did all we
were high school kids, and we're like, what are we doing? Water in the boat, like, just all sorts of absurd things.
Well, it's funny, is Eric Lawson, who's still the USOPC strength coach. His first interaction with rowing was with Igor, and he said, "Oh yeah, I love Americans. They do all the work. Back in the Soviet Union, they only did half." And so knowing that, and myself in high school having, having a coach from the Ukraine or from that system like Igor and Jan were friends, like
Yeah.
going through some of these crazy exercises too. And, you're a military kid. You're saying you don't like results, but you love rowing. So I think and then you go to Wisconsin and thrive there, where as beautiful as it is cold, and you ride,
No, it's harsh.
you ride the machine. And so like, what do you feel is inside of you that helped you thrive in those environments? Because like those are all from high school and your inception is like, I always say the toughest person on a rowing team is the slowest, because they have to do all the same work as everybody else, but just slower, and they don't quit. And I think when you're losing races, like losing a rowing race is just so brutal, because it just is. And but yet you endured this work, and you had this family that definitely was tough, and you're traveling all over the place. Like, are you called to that work? Is it, or is it like, what keeps you involved in just putting yourself through that punishment over and over again, just at that young of an age, to get through it? Is it the sensation of being there for your teammates? Is it just being your own Iron Man? Is it like, take us a little bit through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always, you could sit there and say it's the chip on the shoulder as a smaller guy in a big group. You could say, I'm nowhere near as stubborn as my wife or other people, but you could say it's just pure stubbornness,
Who, by the way, his
and,
wife is Hillary Gaiman, Olympian as well. So
Yeah.
right, the real stud of the family. Um, I think that's a good question. Again, I think for me, high school rowing was like, I just liked it.
Yep.
I truly just liked it. Like, it wasn't, and yeah, I wanted to get results, and I was trying to get fitter and stronger and do stuff, but I just found a sport that I just kind of liked, and the people I was around, and I was very, the coaches I had in high school, that's what they taught, right? It's like, I just liked the sport. I mean, we had lousy equipment. The boat we had would go into the small engine repair shop in the winter, and our coach would teach us how to redo it. And so I just geeked out on that stuff, and like rigging and things like that. So by the time I went to college, it was more, I transformed into, okay, hey, like, I'd like to actually see what I can do in this sport. And it took my college coach, I mean, Chris Clark, I mean, he's the one who said, hey, like, you could actually be really good in this. And so then it was like, and he put me on pathways and gave me opportunities in summer development camps and pre-elites and all that stuff. Up until then, like, I didn't have inkling of that. Yeah, I went to the Olympics in '96 and watched lightweight guys do stuff, but I didn't really know what lightweight rowing was until I went to college, which is funny enough, right? Because Wisconsin does not have lightweight rowing. It's heavyweight men's.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky in Chris Clark saying, hey, like, you're hitting all these metrics and could be a really good elite level lightweight guy in my freshman year. And just said, hey, like, he would just check in randomly every now and then. I was like, hey, how much do you weigh? Okay, I'd submitted your erg scores to this stuff. You should go to this camp this summer. You'll probably get cut. Just try it out. And in the end, I didn't, right? I made the U23 team right after my freshman year. So that's what I always tell people, like, hey, like, even now when I'm recruiting guys, like, I never did junior team stuff. That was just too expensive for my family. I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't ever going to happen. But then when I went to college, I was very lucky to be in those systems and have those opportunities to go and test myself against really good people and be around, some really amazing athletes in the late '90s. When I was just, summer of '97, I'm fresh out of my freshman year of college, and I'm in a pre-elite camp, and then we go, and the guys that were invited to train on, go to Princeton, and it's like, okay, there's guys like Bill Carlucci, and he just won a bronze medal in the Olympics, and I'm standing in the same boat bay as him, right? Like, to a rowing geek, had been losing races by bazillions of lengths in high school to be all of a sudden standing there like, this is awesome. Like, this is just cool stuff. But to answer your question on, okay, hey, I think what drove me and what got me there was just, okay, hey, like, I'll just go until somebody says I can't, or, I'll prove some people wrong. I don't want to say I'll prove people wrong because there was nobody I was trying to prove wrong. It was just like, okay, hey, I was given the opportunity and given some self-belief by my college coach and say, hey, like, try this. You could actually be good. And then that kicked into like, okay, how good can I be? And being very competitive and sort of understanding the lay of the land. And also, yeah, hey, I was at Wisconsin and wanted to make the top votes that I could. My freshman year, my whole goal was, when I went there, I didn't know if I'd be able to row all 4 years because I was not big. So it was like, hey, that's why I chose the schools. Like, I knew I would love being there even if I couldn't row. And I was going to college on an Army ROTC scholarship, and they have a good undergraduate business program. And so rowing was like, hey, like, if I only do it my freshman year, great. And if I'm good enough to keep doing it as a varsity oarsman in my sophomore, junior, and senior year, even better. And so then when I had some success as a freshman, that just drove me to be like, okay, hey, I could be really good. I could be the best guy on this team or one of the best and help them do really good things. And we had success.
Well, and you also, like, the crazy thing is going in there at that time, you had like the Mueller just coming off of that silver.
Yeah. So
Eric
Mueller,
and Borschening, right?
Yeah,
like
no,
Borschening.
Eric Mueller showed up fresh off. I watched him win a medal at the Olympics in '96. 5 weeks later, he's standing at freshman orientation, showing all of us freshmen his medal. Kurt Borschening, who had just come off a smoke jumping career and was training to go back in to join the training center in 1997 when Mike Tatey took it over, trained with us that whole fall in the freshman squad. And I could still to this day, and I told him this a couple of weeks ago, like, remember watching him do a 6K that he had to do when we were on our winter training trip in Austin, Texas. And he went, at the time, what was very, very fast of like 19:0 something. And, again, to all of us young freshmen, 18-year-olds, that was like mind blowing, but he was also like a really normal guy to us. Like, he would just chat with us and talk to us. And so it was like, oh, okay, hey, these guys are awesome. So I was, I sort of got very lucky to be surrounded by people that, had success in the sport, but were also, positive and like, hey, you could do this one day, basically, sort of thing. So it was kind of a really interesting and lucky sort of timing I was there. And those are just the names that people might know. There are plenty of other athletes that I was around.
Did you also get lucky with like your ROTC commander too? Like, did you get lucky on that front too?
I would not say I got lucky.
How did you
I would
juggle
say,
that?
Yep. So that was part of why I went there. So when I got awarded, that's how I was going to go to college out of state. Like, I could have gone to UVA, in-state school, and that was fine. But once I made my decision that I wanted to row for a Division I program, the highest I could get myself to based on where I was in high school, it was going to take a scholarship of some sort. And Wisconsin men's rowing, still to this day, for all the listeners out there, does not have scholarships. Men's rowing is the only varsity sport there that does not offer athletic scholarships. Now, okay, hey, things will change, and now that NIL is available and things like that, money will be able to be offered, which is awesome for them. But so when I went to visit the school, I met with the ROTC commander at the time, and I kind of gave him my goals and what I said I wanted to do, and he was all on board. He was like, awesome, we love athletes, that could be a priority, no problem. And so it's not to say there wasn't challenging moments, but I was very supported by them as much as they could, and it was a give take, right? Certain times of the year would be super stressful, and I'd have to put rowing on a back burner for a little bit, or no, I was only going to operate at 80% on those days. And then other parts of my 4 years, they totally gave me a pass. You know, and that's good information. And that's like, it's, you know, I'm really lucky. We have two of our athletes here at Princeton are in Army ROTC. I think, you know, I can relate to what they go through. And when I was at Cornell, I coached several ROTC athletes. You know, and can kind of relate with them of, hey, these are the emotions you will feel. These are the stress points you will feel. And how do you balance and juggle, you know, understanding that, hey, yeah, some days of the week you won't be 100% and it's okay. And you can kind of grow from that. And that's bigger life lessons, right? Just not feeling like, okay, if I can't do something 100%, then I just shouldn't do it. That's not a good way to think about things, you know, just be able to manage the stress levels and things like that. But so you could say I got lucky in that, hey, they were super supportive.
Yeah.
But I sort of laid it out there to them, and I you know, again, learning to grow up, I would remind them of that during my 4 years of what I was told, you know, in essentially when they recruited me to come there, right?
Yeah.
On the ROTC front, sort of thing.
So you knew enough to basically say, I'm a varsity athlete. Like this is.
Yeah, I told him. Yeah, I was like, hey, I'm coming here to do rowing, undergrad business school, and ROTC. Those are my things I'm doing, and rowing is a massive priority. Like I'm going to be a varsity athlete, and yeah, the commander at the time was. I mean, they were very awesome, and you know, I was the only athlete. But funny enough, like my freshman year, a lot of the football team would take what was called Military Science 101 class. And, you know, so I show up for first day of class and the room is packed. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So many people do ROTC. This is great. Yeah. It was the whole football team, you know, getting their one credit A. But, you know, one of my classmates was Ron Dane, who went on to win a Super Bowl with the Giants and Heisman Trophy winner, was my same year from Wisconsin. And so it was just these funny little touch points that guy did ROTC with me my freshman year for this one credit class a week, sort of thing that I always think back to. But no, yeah, you know, I got lucky in that they were supportive, but now as I get older, it's like, hey, that's the military in general for the vast majority, right? Like they're going to be supportive of endeavors like that. Hey, fast forward, you know, when I graduated, I was in the Army's world-class athlete program, right? Like that's what that program was designed for, was to say, hey, there's people in our military that have Olympic potential. Let's let them try that, reach their potential for a couple of years, full well knowing, hey, that's going to keep them in doing things for us too down the road. And it's just good PR in general.
Do they still have that program? Did I read somewhere
they do. No, it's exploded. Especially, what's really cool is it's exploded on the, especially on the Paralympic side. Yeah, like that's what's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Especially
really awesome.
You know, post
that's
like
really awesome.
08, and you started having people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and other conflicts, and yeah, they've like really exploded on that front, both in the summer and winter games. Which is really cool. I think that's awesome. Yeah, and it's still there. It's based out of Fort Carson, Colorado, which is Colorado Springs, and yeah, it's a great program. And I've always felt the whole the Department of Defense should have a program, not just the Army. So like other guys that have done the similar programs over the years, Henry Newsom, who was in the Navy and a two-time Olympian. The way the Navy worked it was you just sort of got assigned to a place near where you needed to train. There wasn't actually a designated program, whereas in the Army's program, I was being evaluated every year on my ability to make the Olympic team, like what they call your job performance review, your officer evaluation report was bullet pointed on am I making progress and or not. Sort of thing. So it's kind of I was as close as you were ever going to get to being a professional athlete in the sport of rowing in the 2000 to 2008 era. You know, what we also used to joke about what the Italians and the Germans had, basically.
Yeah.
So someone could have yanked you. Sorry, Justin. Someone could have like yanked you and said, like, you're not going to do it.
Justin's been dying to take us
Okay.
question, Steve. You
All
just
right,
keep...
go. Sorry, I'm
So,
all right.
You're always
Steve.
you're always at the beck and call of the United States Army.
Yeah.
So just on that note, so transition us a little bit out of Wisconsin, like into like the next step, because I think it's really it's an interesting thing, because if I'm reading between the lines here a little bit, like it sounds like you did ROTC. You're a military family, right? Background, you know, probably had family members that went to Fort Bragg, and somehow you're tied to North Carolina, and like I'm assuming there's like a interesting military legacy in your family, which is super cool. And then you did ROTC in high school, I'm assuming?
No.
So you got recruited. So how did the ROTC thing play in?
If I wanted to go to college,
got it.
I was going to have to take an ROTC scholarship straight up.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. That was the only way I was going to college out of state.
Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. I thought
you were like ROTC lifer. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you had to have to get that scholarship. You had to do it. That's it. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
okay, so
and I readily will tell people that. And yeah, it's like in my freshman year, I looked at ways to get financial aid, and there wasn't any. And so it was like, I was an 18-year-old when I signed my contract. I was like, well, I'll figure this out as I go. Right. I was talking to somebody recently about this. I'm like, well, it was just, okay, well, this will pay for college. And when I graduate, I'll cross that bridge when it comes, and I'll deal with it. It's like, why think 30 years down the road, and try to overanalyze it. So that's how I went to college and how I could pay for it. So I was on a 4-year scholarship, which paid my tuition. So we only had to pay room and board, basically. So it was a great relief to my family. And my parents were super supportive. Like, I think I grew up, not trying to be a big burden. But so when I graduated in 2000, I knew I was going into the Army. And in fact, I had sort of thought rowing would be done for me, to the extent that in between your third and fourth year of college in ROTC, you go to a leadership camp. That's how they evaluate you, so that you'll determine what branch you go and all this stuff. I actually deferred mine to after my senior year of college, because I had the opportunity to make the U.S. national team in the summer of '99. And so that was a big deal, because if you defer it and you get injured the next year, it's a big complication and problem, basically, because now you're not eligible to get commissioned, essentially. And you have no second chance. And so, but I was like, okay, I'll, whatever. Again, I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. I wanted to try to make the senior national team. So in the summer of '99, I was lucky enough. I was invited to Princeton, to the training center, and there was a group of guys, and there weren't enough people to make an under 23 for that summer, I think, or maybe we just didn't want to send one. So we all kind of went into a little bit of a matrix, to build some pairs that would race at lightweight pairs trials. So there would be the lightweight 4, which was the Olympic class boat. So those guys were, older, better guys. And then the lightweight 8 was next, and then the lightweight pair. And so I was lucky enough to get teamed up with a guy I rode U23s with a couple times, Jamie Peschel, and we randomly figured out how to make a pair go really fast that summer. And again, for the listeners, that's when it was still best 2 out of 3. And it was a scorching, blazing summer of '99 in Princeton. They were redoing the boathouse, and we were rolling out of the parking lot, and it went to 3 races. We won the first race by maybe a foot. And that was, we had heat, semis, and then final 1, we won by a foot. Final 2, we lost by probably 3 feet, and then came back for final 3 and won that by 8 inches, something like that, and put up some pretty quick times. But essentially, I made the senior national team after my 3rd year of college, which which was pretty awesome, and went
That's
racing.
incredibly awesome. That's
St.
incredibly
Catharines,
awesome.
but again, that was so the first time I was back in St. Catharines since '99 was this summer when I was there recruiting for at Junior Worlds and U23 Worlds. So it'd been a long time since I'd been back up there. But essentially, so I raced that, and then was going back into my college season, and was kind of like, okay, well, that's it. I'm done with rowing because I'm going into the Army. But my mom had actually found out about this program called the World Class Athlete Program. And so when I got commissioned, I sort of knew of this program that I could apply to get into eventually in the military.
Yeah, so that it comes back to where my question was going. Again, didn't realize you just picked up the ROTC bid to underwrite university, which makes complete sense. I guess, yeah, my question was like that inflection point, right? It's like, stick with rowing, go to the Army. By the way, like, it's not lost on me, you talked about a business track, right? Within Wisco. So I think that's where, how did that all play out, right? Where was it basically like, hey, I found this program, it's a bit of a hall pass for me to go pursue what I want to try to do? Or how did those kind of competing priorities play at that time?
There was no competing priorities. It was kind of like, hey, like, because it was a program you had to apply to get into.
Got it. Okay.
And so there was no like, hey, no matter what, I was getting commissioned and going into the military. Like that was the only thing. That was the only
that's the deal.
For a certain thing that was going to happen. And then it was going to be, okay, hey, what branch was I going to be in? Like all sorts of things that you just don't know until you sort of get told what they are. And then I didn't even know, hey, would I want to keep rowing? Where would rowing be after the 2000 Olympics? And so I graduated in 2000 and then was commissioned and went into basically my schooling for an infantry officer. And in the process of all of that, I kind of read up more on the program, saw what the entry requirements were, and then had to go ask a commander to sign off on this application to, for a new infantry lieutenant to basically skip his early military career and go into an athlete program. That's where Steve, I would say I got very lucky. The commander of the schoolhouse that I was in, the infantry school, this guy, Major James Kreider, was like, this is awesome. Yeah, he had said when he was like a young lieutenant, he had a couple runners in his program or in his unit that had gone into it or something. So it was just kind of one of these things. He was very supportive and said, absolutely, go try to do that. And that's where I would say I got very lucky. It could have easily been somebody saying, no, that's a waste of money, waste of time. I'm not signing that. But I got lucky and, was able to do it after I completed all of my military schooling. So went to basically infantry officer school for 6 months, went to airborne school for 3 weeks, went to mechanized leader course for 3 weeks, something like that. Went to ranger school. And then the thing that none of you are really like, if you really dive into my timeline, is so I was in the mountains of North Georgia in the middle of ranger school on 9/11. My mom worked in the Pentagon. And so there's, for you, Justin, there's the conflicting question.
Yeah, serious.
Like, okay, do I want to go row? Or in December of 2001, when I'm done with all my schooling, do I go and join my infantry unit that I'm supposed to go do? Like that there was like conflicting, sort of like, okay, what am I really doing? In the end, it was kind of like, hey, it was early days of everything. I was like, okay, like I was, you could say, selfish. I was like, I'm going to try to go row. And I did, so from 02 to 04, I was technically assigned to Princeton, New Jersey to train full time.
I mean,
that's a huge inflection point. Though.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, there's two things in all that just like blow my mind. One is with my original thought is I think it's really important for the listeners, especially young athletes that are trying to figure out how to get better. And Wisconsin, so I'm competing against you at this point, right? Because I'm only a year behind you at Northeastern because my last year was 01. So I remember, and again, you crack me up when you're like, there's no internet, right? Like we had intranets when I first went to Northeastern. We didn't have like internet. So, but you started like submitting scores to US Rowing, and you would have these seasonal, it would be like 6Ks November through January, and then switch to 2Ks. And you start seeing names on there, and you start to know who's out there. And I remember trying to figure out what everybody else was doing. So I'm studying athletic training, so I'm trying to in exercise physiology, so I'm trying to figure out how to be both like lab rat and mad scientist at the same time. And I'm hearing some of the workouts you guys are doing at Wisconsin, like the consistent hour of powers and I just like, dude, these guys hammer the machine, like hammer it. And we had at the time, I had Buzz Congram at the end of his career, and so it wasn't great training at Northeastern at that point. And I just remember trying to replicate some of your guys' workouts and just feeling crushed. And so my first question, because I think it ties into the decision of the reaction to 9/11, but you've gone through Ranger School. I have a couple of other good friends that rowed and did some selection, like Scott Fentress is a SEAL and he's still in, and my buddy Mike Mangan is a Ranger, tier 1 like you. And they would say that rowing training was really beneficial, and especially Division I rowing training, through getting through those selections. And I just was really curious if you felt like that was true for you too. I don't want to say made it easy, but helped, was an advantage. Like being an oarsman was an advantage through that process, both physically from the work, mentally from like, yeah, I've done this hard stuff, but also emotionally because you knew how to bond with people through suffering. Is that accurate, or is that just kind of my buddies trying to be nice to me?
Those are all good touch points. But I think again, like I'll go back to it. You got to be stubborn. It's like at the end of the day, rowing is a self-punishing sport, right? Like you have to be okay with that. Cross country is a close second, or some of the running events. Like if you want to be better at it, it doesn't get easier or hurt less the harder you go, the faster you go. Well, at least not for me. I was not genetically talented that way. Like my lactates would be through the roof, and I was lousy on all the Fritz Hagerman tests. And so I think it was, hey, whenever I was doing rowing stuff, I would use the things I'd done in the military. Whenever I was doing military stuff, I'd be like, well, this isn't as bad as 3x10K, or any of the rowing workouts that we did. But I think, at the end of the day, what really helped was, just, okay, you knew it would come to an end at some point in time. The sun will come up, this 10K will end at some point in time. This hour will end. The clock cannot stop. And just being in the moment and just kind of doing it. I worked out today, and I was thinking about that's how I felt today, and nowhere near as any fit as I was then. But I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep doing this, and it will eventually end. Like the number of reps I'm doing will eventually complete what I had written down. And I think having sort of that mentality and that idea of like, let me just deal with what's in front of me versus getting too big picture on it and too in the weeds, right? Just be in the moment of it, and it's kind of what I said to Justin. Like, hey, when I signed on the dotted line for ROTC, I wasn't sitting here thinking what's 20 years down the road. I was like, well, this will get me through college, and I'll cross the bridge of what comes after, and I'm okay with that, right? You have to be okay with that uncertainty. Yep. And I think that's, the key lesson is just like, be okay with, what's going to happen. It's that idea of, you can't get wrapped up in the results because you don't know what they're going to be. And that's why I think I did have success in rowing, is because I just liked it. It wasn't, in high school, I lost by so many lengths of open water. Like I didn't know you could win medals. Like until I went to college and I won a medal, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Like, I didn't know you could do that. Like that, this is even better than I thought it was going to be. So it was, I truly, and I learned this from Hillary too, like my wife, and like, I just liked to train. I liked to push myself. And I found a sport that rewarded that, plain and simple. And I think that, has to be recognized, especially for people that maybe are not as genetically gifted as some others out there, right? Because that's a whole nother conversation of like, well, why do I lose to this guy that trains half as hard as I do and everything? Like, well, he's just better at it than you.
You mean like the
That's
two?
life.
You mean like the two other guys, myself not being one of the two that are 6'7" on this call, like that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like I could get really upset
6'8".
that
6'8". Sorry, Steve.
Steve and Dan. Like it's again, like when I
You're
saw
only
them
a foot
erg,
taller
like,
than
it
I
was
am.
just fun. It was just fun to watch guys like that erg because they would pull numbers that
Yeah.
I could never see in my life. And I just, again, like going back to being a geek of the sport, I was like, that's just fun to watch. Like, and so I think that, the key thing though for me was like, I liked rowing, but then, in the military world and in the sports performance world, I just dealt with what was in front of me versus trying to get too big, right? And worry about what's going to come way down the road because there's just so many other things.
That's such a good lesson. It's a lesson that I have to, I have a, still to this day have a problem with getting in my own head. And I think it's like, it must be something with Wisconsin too. Like Bo was a great guess and just like simplified it. Bow ahead, good. Bow behind, bad. It just.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, I think, one of my best traits that I have that people have recognized and said, it's like, hey, like the highs can't be too high and the lows can't be too low.
Yeah.
No,
right? In
you're right.
anything.
Yeah.
Right. Just being level headed about it. And it doesn't mean I don't care. Like sometimes people will think that, oh, well, you just don't care. You don't have the pressure. Like, well, no, I do, but it's like you just got to recognize it and be a little bit, some people will say, oh, that's being very callous to things. Like,
no, I think it's
not.
the opposite. It's the you care so much. It's the opposite, actually. You care so much, and you know that you care so much about it that you have to protect yourself from getting too high or low, right? Because when you're on that edge, when you experience life at those peaks and those edges, it's the abyss that is your worst enemy on both directions. Like
right.
getting out of the moment. I think a better way to that's for all these kids that's called mindfulness. Like you got to be present.
It's a hook of a country song, right?
Yeah, you
got to make sure the highs are higher than the lows are low.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I could stay on this all day. So, but I just really wanted to touch because I think it's interesting. You bring up 9/11, and it's just in the chaos that we're living in right now. Like, there's definitely a lot of heat globally that's percolating out there. And my dad being in the military when 9/11 happened, I was still in Boston. Justin and I had talked about this. We knew exactly where we were. We were in the van coming back from practice, and I got to my apartment, and by the end of that day, my dad had driven from Norwalk to Boston and just like showed up. No cell phones or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, promise me you'll go in as a medic. Right. I was like, and I kind of was like, how did you know? Like, because my Mike, who wound up serving, when he and I were talking about like, we're going to go enlist. It's time.
Yeah.
And he's like, promise me you'll use your medical degree and you'll be a medic. Like,
mm-hmm.
I said, okay. And I went and started to talk to recruiters. And then Katie called and said that we were sending a group of athletes to the head of the Ohio in Pittsburgh. And we were going to be the first U.S. sports team to fly.
Right.
To show that we're not scared.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that actually.
Yeah, and so like it was Volpe, Luke McGee, I think Walton. I wish he was on right now. But long story short, it was like, rowing became my way of defining that moment. Defining
mm-hmm.
the enemy, defying them. It's like fuck you. We're gonna get on a plane. We're gonna go race, and it was like the first time I felt like an American hero, and I forgot all about that. So thank you. But yeah, like I can't, that is such a conflicting place to be. And I think it's amazing to know that, because I would love to get to kind of 2003, like, because now you're in the system, like you're on this program, like you convinced this person to say, yeah, let's have what is going to be one of our best leaders, because you proved that after 04. But so you convince everybody that you're going to be an Olympian through the military first. Like, what a freaking hard sell.
I
You
convinced
know,
them to
like,
give me the chance.
you know, like and you show up back to Princeton and you start that journey. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, what are some of the biggest obstacles you had to get to that starting line in 04?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was. I think I'm lucky enough that I rode in every lightweight sweep event you could row in at the time, right? The pair, the 8, and then eventually the straight 4 in the Olympics. But yeah, I was lucky enough to be in the program. I was very lucky to the people that were running the training center at the time, Mike Katie, to let me sort of come back and just train in the Princeton area. And so spring of 02, I was pretty darn out of shape rowing wise. And so I was very lucky to just be given that opportunity. Made the lightweight 8 in the summer of 02. So that was good progress. And we medaled as technically the second priority boat after the straight 4. But, and this is where I talked to a lot of athletes about it, came back from that and was promptly essentially cut from the training center. Like, they had to reduce numbers. They were only going to be allowed to keep 6 lightweights, I think, at the training center. And so the lightweight pair had done really well that summer too. And so those guys were brought into the training center along with the lightweight 4, and everybody else was told essentially, stand in front of the Princeton boathouse. I was told, go find a single and learn how to scull. And that was at a time which, reading current selection procedures, pretty similar, whereas like mandatory races, right? You had to go to the fall speed order, and that fall speed order was in 5 weeks. And so called up Hudson and said, I need to buy a boat and I'm going to teach myself how to scull and go to this fall speed order in the fall of 2002. And that was coming off of winning a bronze medal at the World Championships. So it's not like I'd done anything egregious. I had sort of done what I was supposed to do, right? Won a medal at the World Championships, and but was promptly sort of cut with some other guys, and we went over to Mercer Lake, and once a week somebody would go over to the Princeton boathouse and copy the training program down that was posted on the wall outside the men's locker room, and we take it back to our backfield at the Mercer boathouse and run ourselves way before anything else was going on. I mean, those were the days, because it was just, there'd be 6 of us joining. We were just rowing 6 across in singles, and having a blast, and I would sort of do hard work out on the erg and then just go dink around in a single, trying to get myself capable enough to go and race. And then fast forward to the spring of 03, I got really, really lucky. Eric Miller, one of my best friends and teammates, was looking for a pair partner or doubles partner for the spring speed orders. And, he kind of called me up and said, hey, I'm sort of the third starboard in this group. I need somebody to row with. And initially we were going to do the double, but then it turned into the pair. And long story short, we forced the hand through our results in the spring speed orders to get ourselves on to the World Cup trips in the lightweight 4. Because at the time, the procedures basically said if you finish in the top 2 at the speed orders or the national selection regattas, you had to be given that opportunity. And so we forced our hand, and forced the coach's hands, and sort of, for lack of a better word, bullied our way into the boat. And so made the lightweight 4 in the summer of 03, qualified the boat for the Olympics, which was, kind of always the goal. Didn't get as high as we want. We had won a medal at one of the World Cups, which was a big deal for that boat class. And then
it's a huge deal. It's such
Worlds
a
had done
event.
okay. But again, fast forward September of '03, and I'm having a heart-to-heart, if you want to put it that way, conversation with Chris Korzanowski, who's basically about to cut me from the training center again. And I will say it's probably one of the only times I've truly gotten into an argument with a coach and stood up for myself. And sort of like, you're not cutting me. There's no way I just qualified the boat. I just did all this. Like, you got to at least invite me to the training camp over the winter of that year. So he sort of begrudgingly said, okay. And then, so I was able to go to San Diego, a fateful San Diego trip that you well remember, Dan.
I'm saving that one for when Wyatt comes on, because you guys just destroyed us for week after week. Like, Steve, I don't know if you know this, or Justin, you know, but like, just because Matt's laughing, Wyatt had switched to sculling the sweep, and I volunteered.
It's November of 2003.
Yeah, so I drove the trailer out there with John Wall, first of all, like, as it's on fire, like it was literally on fire. The mountain on the other side was like, and Wyatt and I were the only heavyweights with all the lightweights out there. The scullers were out there too. And basically Wyatt and I just got our asses handed to us by these guys over and over and over again. And it was just like the report going back is like, yep, Dan and Wyatt suck. They're getting beat by lightweights. So yeah, I remember.
Those
are
the good times, right? Like, I mean, that was you talk about some of the hardest training I've ever done in my life. You know, rowing wise, was those 6 months. Like,
that was brutal.
Yeah, it's like there's some brutal workouts I did at Wisconsin, but those weeks when there was several weeks when we were logging 48 to 52K a day.
Well, but also the pressure, right? Like every stroke mattered. Yeah. Every stroke mattered. Every win and loss was measured. And we actually had a strength and conditioning center. So like the coaches were like, oh, hey, why don't you lift weights now? You know? So there was that adaptation, but I mean, like, especially because, and I think this is really important for the guests. And one of the things we like to really kind of tie into this is we're discovering these through lines of, and you're articulating it so well, Matt. We have these really obvious high improving behaviors, right? It goes beyond just a high performance mindset, but it's like how the approach seems to be very similar to like grudge, chip on the shoulder, prove something wrong. Some people have legacy. Some people just want to see how far they can go, but that camp, especially for the lightweights, because at that point, yes, there was the lightweight double, but that was kind of in some ways locked up with Steve Tucker, I think. And there were 10 guys there for 4 spots.
Eight were invited. Yeah, we started in Princeton with 12. 8 were invited to the winter training camp.
So I mean, just
run through the spring. Yeah.
And you guys have to, I think that, and you have to kind of be on weight and, man, like, so what was your edge? Like, what was your secret weapon that you think you had over everybody else that kept you in it?
That's a great question. Again, I think I think all the guys in that training center were this way, in that group. I mean, it was a phenomenal group, and it was just, at times, it was just survival. Well, I think, okay, hey, from a physical standpoint, I was very lucky. I was a durable individual. I didn't get injured in that era. And so I think, like, that played to my strengths. I think also just, again, like, being able to take it a day at a time and roll with it. And hey, if I had a bad week, just being able to rebound and move on from that and not let it bog me down and distract me from what was in front of me. I don't think I had any secret success or genetic talent, right? I could just keep grinding, and when performance really mattered in a few of the key races, I came through. But again, like, there were plenty of telltale signs, and I tell this to current rowers that I coach, like, hey man, I can tell you how the week before every one of my best national selection regattas, I was rowing horribly. I was getting bad results, and I just kept coming back to practice the next day and not letting it bog me down or worry me too much, and just focus on staying positive, and performing in the moment, is how I would say. Because hey, there were some rough patches in that camp. I mean, there were some weeks where I was okay, I am low man on the totem pole right now. I need to figure out how to perform and get some results in my favor, because I am going to get cut if I'm not careful.
Yeah. I mean, that's dude, that's such a strong word for an athlete. Like, cut still just sends, like, I can feel the clamminess in my mouth. I can feel like in that moment, and I think everybody had it. And especially, like, almost everybody gets cut multiple times before they make it. And I just think of, sitting on the water in that moment where you feel like the handle, like, I could remember feeling the wood of the handle. I could feel the bounce of the water, and I could almost feel like the breath of the pair partner and hear it. And just feeling like, if I don't get myself out of this hole now, this could be over. And I mean, like, how did you get your, well, go ahead, Steve. I was just like, could you take us through when you were in that moment? Like, what were some of the tools you used to get out of it? Like, can you remember feeling those moments, like, on the water and being like, this is a make or break?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I had a lot of things I could reference it back to, and I think for me, a lot of times how I am, it's just, it could always be worse. Right. And so it's like, it wasn't like, oh, self-motivation or self-talk. It was just like, okay, like, something, I would try to analyze it a little bit, be a little bit more analytical, be like, okay, hey, am I doing something wrong? Did I not get enough sleep? Did I not eat right? Am I just taking bad strokes? Like, what is going on? But I think, like, there were moments, again, like, I would reference things from some of the military things I had done. I could, in the middle of Ranger school, when you're, on very, very low sleep and caloric intake, and you completely bomb what's called a leadership patrol. That's where you're getting, bent over and screamed at, and it's just like, okay, like, those were low moments, because that was like real life. To me, rowing was like, it was bonus, man. It was like, that was fun stuff. Like, at the end of the day, if I didn't make it, I would have been completely upset. Absolutely. Especially if it had been something I had done wrong. Right. If somebody had just straight up beat me, then it's like, hey, they beat me. Like, that guy beat me and it was better than me. But I think, like, to keep me going in those low moments, it was just like, hey, come back another day, live to fight another day. Right. Like, and that's kind of, hey, like, it's like, I'm always of the mindset of, like, force somebody to say no to you. Right. Don't just assume the answer is going to be no, or assume you won't get into something. Like, no, hey, like, throw the dart at the dartboard and see what can happen. Right? And in rowing, it was like, I was lucky because I was given opportunities. I could still go to races. And hey, if I didn't perform there, then I didn't perform. Right. But in between all that, all those lows were, it's like, hey, they're horrible in the moment, but there was always worse.
So, yeah. So take us, if you can, from.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. But if you can, take us from the, okay, you're in a very fierce competitive environment, right? With everybody there could make the boat at any time, right? Anybody could have their day. Take us to actually making the boat, right? Like how did all that transpire? You know, we know all about the selection process. It's, you know, this whole
Wow.
matrix and what have you, but like, was Corzo the guy that also named you to the boat, right? And so, like, talk to us about
Yep.
that full circle. Talk to us a little bit about, like, okay, I've gone to Wisco. I did this, you know,
Yep.
special
Yep.
program with the Army, and now I
Yep.
actually am fulfilling that end of the bargain, if you will. So just of actually making the Olympic team. So yeah, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a, and I don't know, maybe I haven't had many great successes in other realms, but I'm sure there's like this for people that have had success in other things, right? It's a little bit of bittersweet, right? Because
Yep.
your success, somebody else didn't.
We've talked about it a lot on the show.
Right. And I think like, hey, like, here's a story for you. You know how we went from 8 to 6? It was a survivor vote on, not a coach's decision. So there's a lesson learned when you go into leadership roles, right? Like, actually make the decision. Don't force it on the people, right? Like, that was some of the hardest moments of my life, writing names down on a piece of paper, and then the coach read them off and said, okay, well, these are the 3 ports, these are the 3 starboards based on votes. And those are your best friends. Yeah. like that's not a good model of any leadership in my mind. I'll be blunt. Right. So that was early in the selection process. And then, yeah, once the boat was actually named, you know, I think, hey, like, it was awesome. It was great. It was more of a relief. You know, I can still remember calling my dad, you know, and he was so, you know, he was in tears, right? I think that was, to me, that was the most special thing ever.
Where were you?
Driving out of the Princeton Boathouse parking lot, turning on the Hapsey Road. So like cool. 2 moments in my life that
cell phones existed then.
That's 04.
Cell phones existed then.
04 by then, man. Yeah.
It was 04, man. Yeah,
it was a flip phone.
The candy bar.
No. I had graduated to a flip phone by then. I think it was a Nokia or Samsung. Forget, you know. Like, yeah, I totally graduated.
Did you use your nights and weekends, or just burn some minutes on?
Hey, probably burn some minutes on that one. Yeah, that
one. Minutes. Yeah. That was worth it.
And that was an expensive call, dude.
But
it's like a $5 call.
I don't think I did burn minutes, because I think it was at the time when
friends and family, dude. Friends and family.
Friends and family.
Yeah. Right. But it was minutes well burned.
Holy shit. So the 2 moments, sorry to derail, but that was, one, you know, we could do a Verizon commercial if they want to sponsor us too.
Right. When I found out I was going to graduate Ranger School, when I passed my last patrols and found out, and I called home, and that was probably the only time in my life I'd like called, like, said, Mom, Dad, I really want you at graduation. And that was going to be 48 hours later or something like that. Those are the 2 moments. Like, everything else, like, I missed college graduation. I was racing at Eastern Sprints. All the other stuff I'm pretty unemotional about. But when I graduated, that because my dad had graduated from the same school in '75, and then when I made the Olympic team, I thought that was pretty sweet for them. Just because, hey, they had done so much for me, right? As a parent now, it's like, holy smokes, I'm sure they were so pumped. You know? Sort of thing. Yeah, and then, yeah, hey man, the Olympics, they're great. Yeah, I think it's awesome. As I tell people my experience, hey, the first week of racing was kind of lousy, but the second week was amazing. But again, like you're not going to get much more out of me on that stuff. Like, it's you know, I'm very lucky that I got to go. You know, it was awesome. Loved it. Wished it had gone better, but you know, that's another dissection like of training and physiology, and you know, where we took some missteps over the course of the previous 9 months. But it's 20 years ago now, so it's like,
it is,
you know.
And I think the thing that's crazy about it too is that everyone knows, for the most part, someone who's going to be on the show has been an elite rower in some format. And I think, like, even Luke, yes, he was an Olympian, but it was like, dude, talk us through, like, never losing a race in college, you know?
Right.
Like, exactly. To me, I'm just like, that just nonstop winning. Like the Olympics, don't get me wrong, is incredible, right? And
Yep.
and
Yeah, and
it's
him and Artur were impressive.
yeah, and you know,
Also
and
forced
so
hands, for sure.
yeah, like also definitely, yeah, it's slaying your best friend and being able to hug him. I think that's like that's what I've reduced it down to. And it's like, what's it take to be an Olympian? I was like, can you beat the shit out of your best friend and have him hug you
Yep.
when you're done?
Yeah.
But I have kind of two questions that maybe tie in with each other. But one is, you know, appreciating that it's hard to talk about the Olympics from all different ways because it is so emotional. It is so big and grandiose, but it also is like you can see it. It's on TV, and so
Mhm.
I'm always just interested in how we get there. Like that's what I'm really trying to discover is like, what does it take to get there? Because so much has to do with luck, and you really articulated it well. Is like training programs, and does someone get sick, and was your travel okay? And from my experience, everything has to go right, or you just have to have more things go right than wrong to be able to make it to the podium, let alone the top.
Yeah.
But in all the training you've done, both for the military and rowing, you know, could you take us through your best race ever that you remember, your favorite race from, and who are you the villain of their story because of maybe that race? Like, is there a
Man, best
nemesis?
race ever?
Was there a nemesis?
That's a question for a nemesis. That's a really good and loaded question because it's like, okay, hey, like, what's the best race I just remember? And was it because I was rowing with some really good friends and just having a blast? Or, okay, hey, this is the best race because that was a key moment and a key performance that was needed um, to get me to the next step, right? And like I tell a lot of people, hey, like, do I remember many races? Quite frankly, no, right? Because like all the best stuff was like all the stuff outside of the boat. All my highs and lows were outside of the boat. It's like I can remember more of the bad races. My very first collegiate 2K, was the closest I also came to quitting the sport. Right? It's like we're Wisconsin freshmen, we're rowing in Indianapolis, and I'm 7th seat of a boat, catch a over the head crab, seat comes off the tracks. Michigan goes by us. I somehow clamor and get my seat back on. Meanwhile, I cause the stroke seat to crab. We somehow get it all back together and like get going and win the race by a little bit. And
that's pretty cool.
That's impressive.
That's pretty cool.
That actually could be your favorite race. Best
what I can
recovery
tell
ever.
you is that is a long 6-hour ride from Indianapolis back to Madison, Wisconsin, when your coach is on the CB radio talking to the other coach saying, I don't need recruits anymore. I don't need experienced athletes anymore. Get rid of all of them. And,
oh, man.
Like that was like that 24 hours after that, I was like, okay, I think I'm done. But hey, showed up at practice the next day. We were going to do a 2,500 meter erg. Chris Clark, who had just 18 hours earlier, was like basically blasting me. Came over and said, "Hey man, we need you. I need you to do this on this erg. Like you can do it." And pulled one of my best pieces ever. So that was a segue of like a bad moment.
But
best
I mean, that's
race ever.
Yeah.
It's like I'm dating myself because I'm just older. It's like now I live vicariously through all the guys I've coached. I think, hey, like I had some good races in the national selection regattas that year. College races were good.
Maybe this will help. Is there a race that helped you realize you were world class? Even if it's an erg piece, like when was the moment that you knew you were good?
Yeah, you belonged in where you were, right?
It was never
Yeah.
it was never I knew I was good until after the fact, when I was at a camp and somebody had said, "Oh," it was my freshman year, and you're like, "Oh, you're the Wisconsin guy that went 8 minutes on a 2500, which at the time was really good for lightweights, and then a day later broke 17,000 on an hour power." Which is 145.9, which is a reasonable score for a small guy, but nothing special these days.
That's
And it wasn't until then, like that was just another day at the office back in college. That was like that's what I was supposed to do, to survive basically,
yeah.
and make boats. But it wasn't until somebody just at one of the camps, I think it was that summer when I made the under-23 team, like, "Oh, you're the guy that did that." And I was like, "What? What do you like? Like, how do you know our erg scores?" But it was like, again, Chris Clark, like was biggest advocate of mine. The guy that like created my path to good rowing success. Kind of had put that stuff out there and why I got invited to stuff. So I would say then. But again, I think what makes good people good is, they're rarely are they actually thinking they're good.
No, that I think,
So-
and that's why I asked that question, right? Is getting to it, right? Most of us don't think we're good until something, but you have to think you could be good enough, and I think that's the body of work. But
just
yeah,
just to segue for a second, like this is a bit of a tangent, so just stay with me for a second, because we've had a lot of people on the show, and I want to parlay this question into your coaching today and kind of talk through your coaching, because I think it's a super important part of the story. But we've had a few people on you're now our 12th guest. Congrats, you're season 2, episode 2, by the way.
deuce.
But yeah, deuce. Double twos. But that said, like we've had a couple people on that basically, and I'll tell you who they are, that just didn't know any better, so to speak. They were just like, well, that's what I was supposed to do, or that was the rabbit I had to chase. And so my question from a coaching perspective now is, there too much information and too much measurement, versus back when we were all on the come up and we were in the situations. So good example, like, I don't know if you listened to the episode with Volp, but there was a guy at Ohio that wrote a fictitious erg score that Volp was like, "Oh, I guess I have to go like 550, whatever, 556 or something."
Eric Smith.
And so he was just like, "Yeah, that was just, I guess, what it had to do." Or
I love how you know who the fake erg was.
That was my era. I mean, I knew that.
Yeah.
That was all stuff going on.
Yeah, and then you had Bo,
Volt didn't say.
yeah, obviously out of your boathouse with Bo, a little bit after you, who was just like, yeah, like that was what you had to pull for the hour, so I just did it for an hour. And again, like walk on, didn't row in high school, whatever. As Bo liked to describe himself, a smoking golfer from Wisconsin, that fell into rowing. But I guess my question is, from a coaching perspective, and we'll take it to the coaching side now, is like, is what's better, knowing all the metrics and chasing like all these, you can measure to the nth detail, and there's all kinds of technology to track it and whatever. Like I just think I remember rowing with Dan in college, and he had a notebook that he wrote in with a pencil, right? Like, versus like, again, so there's just these interesting dynamics, and we were talking about this before the show started.
Yeah, no, I think the information
gains.
is good. And like I said, I was a rowing geek. I knew all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
I just didn't think I was ever gonna achieve some of those metrics, or I always saw like, okay, yeah, hey, I did this, but I could point to 5 other guys that were way faster than me.
Got it.
Already. Yep. Like, so it wasn't like I didn't think I was not good. It was just like, right, I know that's good, but I don't know, Bill Plifka's doing this, Kevin Cotter's doing this, Paul Tady's doing this. It's like I can list all the other guys that were in front of me.
Yeah.
So it was more like, oh, wow, I can actually be mentioned in the same conversation and then as them. Like that was more of the thing. It wasn't mean, I knew all that stuff. I loved throwing like up the door with it all. I mean, it's like, yeah, you mentioned people. It's like I can tell you all that stuff. Like, I mean, I got boxes of it still downstairs, you know. And so I think as a coach, information is good, and it's how it's processed and presented and used is important, right? You know, and in the absence of information, that's when, you know, the quote unquote rumor mill will start, or like the stuff you'll just like, well, this is what I hear is going on elsewhere. Whereas then, like you had the monthly erg sheet would come out, and so you knew what people were doing. Hey, maybe it was fake. Okay, that's a different conversation. But you at least knew. It wasn't like, oh, there's a guy doing this and there's a guy doing that, but nobody knew. It was like, yeah, well, hey, the monthly sheet came out and I saw where I was ranked. Like that was good. And I think it's no different than today. I think like, hey, information is good, and how to process that, right, is important. And if that flusters an athlete, that flusters a person on their performance feedback, right, to put it in just real world, right, it's job performance feedback, then that's okay. Like, then let's learn how to get through that, right? If that paralyzes you seeing your name down a list, let's talk about why. And what is your motivation here? Like, is your motivation purely just to be the highest on the list? Is your motivation purely just to get a result, right? And that's what I think, you know, like, I'm sure some of your guys thought, like, when we read all the news articles about professional athletes or Olympic athletes struggling of what to do post-Olympics, I get it. I understand it. I hear it. But I also sometimes question, well, were they just doing it purely for a result? And now they're lost because they didn't get the result, or they did get the result. Right? Like,
we've talked about that too. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, I
did it because I liked it a lot. Like, like I just liked it, you know. And you know,
I mean, I will say to that question, right, is that's a big reason why I started this, Matt, is because rowing kind of saved my life, and it defined me. And there's a lot of times I still feel lost because I have a result and I just didn't think it was good enough, and I think it's an obsession. You know, it's like I think it just shows the breadth of the type of person that it takes to go in there. Is like I kind of just, the biggest thing that brought me into rowing is like, it saved my life because it did give me friends at a young age when I was really scared and alone. And I didn't, being fast kind of made people attracted to that friendship because you could help them achieve their goals. Like, I think maybe it's the opposite, is when you have one of the bigger ergs, or you're able to, like, when you know that you have the ability to help other people achieve their goals. You know, that's the way I really coach. Like, that's what drives me when I miss coaching. And that's why I like asking questions from athletes who did it, and so I think that I really appreciate that I had friends like you that kept it simple and were there. Like, you were always a good reminder. Like, there was always a cohort where, like, everybody cared a lot, but you could see that some people did really have this appreciation to be there. And you are a tremendous coach, right? Like, we talked about your lineage, and you're a tremendous leader. Like, you literally have the chest candy to prove it. You've been acknowledged by, you know, one of the finest institutions of military. I know you're a hell of a husband. Yeah, I know you're a hell of a husband. You're a hell of a father. Like, everybody respects you. I tremendously respect you. I look up to you. I remember one of the coolest things I thought was when we were living together and you had letters from the, you know, kids pasted on your wall. Like, you know, like, you really were motivated.
I make sure every person sees that.
Yeah, you're really, you know, really just motivated by, you won't wear the mantle willingly, but you're an American fucking hero. And I think it's really, you're a great teammate.
The cape's in the closet.
And and to me, I have, you know, one final question, because I want to respect your bedtime, old man, is because of all this leadership, because of how incredible you are, because of this amazing journey you've taken us on, if you could go back in time and any time in your life and coach yourself, when would it be and what would you say?
Yeah, that's a good one. I had some good coaches over the years, right? So it's like I feel like, well, I would go say this, but somebody said it to me. Like my parents were awesome, my college coaches were awesome, my high school coach was great. Yeah, I wouldn't change much. I'll be blunt. Like it's like and not second guess it. I think yeah, you should have texted me that before this whole thing. Then I could like give you a story.
Then it's not.
You
Then
drop that one at the end, and
it's
it's
not
a
fun.
good thing. I think
Might have to come back and answer it then if you don't have it now.
yeah, I would almost say it's like the realm of unknown of being a father, right?
Great.
Like
That's awesome.
which is in the past 13 years. That's probably where I could have had more advice and things to do, and because that's one where you're on a daily basis like, am I getting this right? am I am I going to make sure these kids turn out okay, or am I getting this wrong? And some days you feel like you're hitting a home run, and other days you feel like, okay, you're not hitting a home run. I think it's a good question, and I think, I got into coaching because I had a very formidable college career with my coaches, and it is very similar to the military where you're around 18 to 23-year-old young people at very important times of their lives, and just trying to help them be good people, right? And have good heads on their shoulders, and be in an environment, college is a great environment where, hey, it's okay to fail, right? And learn how to process that and handle that, because the real world is the real world, man, and it'll eat you alive at times. And I think that's the real goal in some of this stuff. So I'm avoiding your question in a lot of ways, but I think it's like, no, I think I'm comfortable with all the decisions I've made over the years, right? It's like there's a few moments, maybe when I was in Iraq, where I should have spoken up louder on a few missions we did, but in the end, it all turned out okay. But no, nothing that I'd recoach myself. I was trying to think of a story when I was younger, but I still remember my dad was there at this soccer game, and he's like, "Why are you taking your cleats off? The game's not over." And I was like, "Well, he took me out, and I'm not going back in." But my dad was there to tell me to put my cleats back on, so I couldn't go back and tell myself that. Again, I was, yeah, but I've been very lucky, is what I'll say. Very, very lucky in everything I've done, and I don't second guess any of the things I've ever done. Everything. I learned very early on. In my senior year of high school, my dad gave me this line. It was like, "Hey, everything happens for a reason," and I carried that with me in all my low points and all my high points, right? And I was like, "Hey, everything happens for a reason," and I'm not a massively religious person or anything like that, but I think that was really good information, um, and I think that's super helpful. So that's what I got. What do you got, Coppola?
I was going to say we're very fortunate that you let the universe speak and decided to come on tonight.
But there was no we soccer practice ended early tonight. If you got me tomorrow night, I've got a flag football playoff game that I'm trying to get to. If you got me Thursday night, there's another soccer practice. So it's like,
dude,
everything happens for a reason.
Hey, everything happens for a reason, and no,
yeah,
you didn't avoid my question, buddy, because actually I think
Answer the question.
sometimes we forget. You answered it really well, because sometimes a really good coach just says, "Hey, you're doing great. Keep going."
Mhm.
Right? There's
gotta be
nothing to
honest.
change. There's nothing to change, right? Sometimes you just got.
Nah,
There's nothing to change. You're doing great. Keep going. So,
yeah, it's like, and again, it goes back to this: why I don't want to waste too much energy second guessing stuff.
no, and that's yeah.
Like, man, we could go down some rabbit holes on that, and you'll drive yourself crazy. It's like,
Yeah,
be
well,
in the moment, and
those are different shows.
yeah,
Yeah.
have fun with it. I'm very lucky at the end of the day. I'm coaching rowing. Like, things could always be worse. Right?
Yep.
That's what I
Yeah.
try to tell people.
Well,
We know that.
we know that. We know that.
But
Dude, Captain Smith, Justin,
yeah,
do you have
that was
something?
good.
Do you have something?
No, yeah, no, I was just
Oh,
You
gonna
got
say
another
it's
question
a
for
really
me?
good.
I feel like you don't get to ask the real question. You
It
let
depends on the
Steve
episode. Depends on the episode.
and
Depends on
Dan
on the
bully it too much.
flow. It depends on the flow. But
I
I'll
mean,
tell you a
are you
fun.
so
I'll tell
Dan?
you a
Here's my
fun
question:
story.
Are you
I'll
going to
tell you a
get
fun
Pinterest?
story to close it out, and then.
Wait, Smith's trying to talk some shit. Hold on, what is he
Sorry.
saying?
Go ahead.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Are you gonna be able to get Pinterest at some point in time? Or you think is he allowed to
So
even do this stuff?
okay, so I still get to keep in touch with Fenny, and it's intermittent based off of where he is and
Yeah.
when he is. But no, I sent him one, and he said it's awesome, and I said I'd love to have you on, and so I think it's just when he's ready, he's always welcome, man. Like
Yeah. I mean, he's sort of in a reasonable spot right now, because I think he's like not super busy based on
yeah.
kind of the stuff I've seen.
Yeah, so I got it, but no, I got him. I'd love to get Nizam on. I'd love to get like Andrew Midlander. I don't know if I can handle it.
Who knows what you'll get with that?
Who knows what you get? And but yeah, I mean, Justin, I'll let you finish out the story, but I just like Matt, just on behalf of myself and my family that are in the military, I did not get to serve. But I really appreciate what you and your kind do for us. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for coming on, man, and coming on this week.
Yeah, no worries.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along and subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.